Welcome to another Ozarks Voices oral history interview, a project of Missouri State University Libraries and its Ozark Studies Institute initiative. I'm Craig Amason with University Libraries, and today's date is Tuesday, January 28th, 2020. Our special guest is Mr. Jerry Tolbert, and we are at Breshears or Breshears? Breshears. Tolbert Farm in Strafford, Missouri. For the record, Mr. Tolbert, can you start off by telling us when and where you were born?
Everton, Missouri, 1944.
Okay. What can you tell us about your formative years? Were you raised on a farm?
Yes, I was raised on a farm, and we left the farm when I was 15, I think, and which I was glad to do because we didn't have inside bathroom, running water, no telephone, out in the country.
Real farm.
Which about everybody that was farming back then. Well, there was a neighbor about a mile and a half away that had a telephone. So if you wanted to use the phone, you had to go up there to their house.
A lot of the people that you knew were farmers as well at that time?
Yeah.
Their children were children of farmers?
Right, yeah. The majority of I was raised at, I went to school at Greenfield, but I was raised about 3 miles east of South Greenfield, along Turnback River.
Okay.
And about everybody had, 12 to 20 milk cows. You had hogs, you had a chicken house. You put out a big garden, you picked blackberries, gooseberries, and pretty well. You didn't go to the store for much, but flour and coffee and sugar,
Right, staples. Were most of the farms diversified like that?
Yeah, basically some of them, they might have milked 25 cows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they was a big operation if they had 25 cows they was milking. But that's,
okay.
But yeah, I was. My granddad, he was on the farm all his life. Never owned a tractor. Done everything with teaming horses. When I was a kid, I remember there was a little store down there, a country store, which there was a lot of them back then.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the store and teaming the wagon, to get chicken feed or whatever. So, that's. I hate to bring that up because that kind of shows how old I am.
But that, so most of the children you knew were raised on farms too. Were they helping with the farms?
Oh yeah.
When did you start helping? How young were you when you started helping with the farm?
I don't know. I was probably 6 or 7 when I had to go get the cows.
Mm-hmm.
That's. Now we had a horse and what have you, but that. People nowadays ride horse for pleasure, but that I always considered it work.
Mm-hmm. Right. Milking cows?
Yeah, by hand.
Doing that when you were young as well?
Yeah, milk by hand. I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years before we left the farm, we got a surge milking machine installed and a cooler that you set your milk down in.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, I wasn't very old. You take a 3-gallon bucket of milk, and take 2 of them, and I had to carry it down to the well where we drawed water to cool the milk.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how old I was, but that 3-gallon bucket of milk in each hand is about all I could carry. So.
Was your family selling milk then to a co-op or anything like that?
Yeah. I went to Carnation in Mount Vernon.
Okay.
But it's canned. My dad run a can route, picked up milk, and
mm-hmm.
I think that's called grade C milk. I'm not sure, but
mm-hmm.
And then eventually everything went to bulk tank, and and that pretty well drove the little guy out.
Mm-hmm. What was the community life like? School, church, whatever. Do you remember?
I was just. I never was too interested in school, but there wasn't anything else to do if you didn't go to school. There wasn't anything going on. But no, probably 80% of the kids and what I went to school with were all on the farm, raised on the farm, and some of them out towards Arcola, which is about halfway between Greenfield and Stockton, pretty good land out there, and they row cropped a lot out there. But where we lived, fescue saved that country.
Right.
You grew a little less beans, and we row cropped a little bit, but not a lot, so little wheat and what have you. But that, basically, I was telling my wife that, her dad was the one that I bought this place from, and basically he farmed like we did till he had to go to town and get a job, So that's, I don't remember what year that was, probably in the 50s when he quit and went to town. He got a job at Lily Tulip and was there for 25 years or whatever. But it's got to the point where little guy, you just couldn't hardly make it. And if you didn't, like I say, if you didn't have cows, chickens, hogs, and a big garden, why, you couldn't make it at all on the farm. Which today, why, I've got my farm leased now. I have had for several years. I guess the last 2 years I run about 30 cows. And I had 100% calf crop, and I was over one morning on an open tractor with no cab. It was about zero, and I decided, this is really not too much fun. And the last 2 years I had 100% calf crop, and I figured I made about $5,000, and I decided I can lease my place for that. So my dad passed away in '99, and he had 80 acres up by interstate, and we had another couple tracts of land. And I was going to, we had our machinery together, I was going to buy his half out, and I got to thinking about it that, I was going to lose 80 acres, and I didn't have any help. I did hay for 2 or 3 years after that, but Mom had a sale, and I just sold all my interest in machinery and everything. So, I've still got 3 tractors and brush hogs and what have you, but I don't, that's about all I get done.
What happened to your father's farm?
Mom stayed there for 5 or 6 years, and then we finally sold it and had a sale, and she moved to Cooper Estates.
Do you know how that farm came into your father's possession? I mean, was that handed down from his father? Or?
No, it was bought from George Kennedy. That he owned quite a bit of land in that area, and he bought had 80 acres there on his place, and then we bought 28 acres right up across from Peterbilt on the north side of the road, and I had a track at 125 and C, I think it is, up at Strafford, and I still own those. So I've started out, I bought, her dad had 80 acres, and we bought this 40, and several years later, this 20 come available, and I was able to get it, and then after that, I bought their place, and then another 20 east there become available, and I bought it, and then this last week I bought another 10 acres on east of it. So I've been able to accumulate land that joins me.
Right. Did your father was he a first generation farmer, or was his father a farmer?
No. No, my granddad was a farmer, and his dad was a farmer, and
all in Missouri.
Yeah, all in Dade County, and around Everton, Greenfield area.
Is farming the only thing your father ever did, or did he start out doing something else and move to farming?
No, he started out farming, and like I say, it was about the same thing then. He still farmed, but he run a canned milk route.
Right.
And then, like I say, when I was about 15, we moved to South Greenfield, and he was trucking then, and I went in the service in '63, and I got out of the service on April 8th of '65, and they moved from South Greenfield to Springfield then, and he was working for Camel 66, and in trying to think what year, in about 1972, I think, something like that. We started our own trucking business, and my dad and I, and then we sold it in '90. So.
And in '90, were you already farming?
No.
By 1990. Okay,
No,
so trucking was your full time
Right.
work.
I lived in Willard at that
Okay,
time.
okay. That makes you kind of interesting in respect of some of the other farmers that I'm talking to, because you've had other careers.
Yeah.
But farming became your primary source of income after you got the farm in the '90s, correct?
Well, no, not really. You'd starve to death. Well, I think once if you was raised on a farm, you eventually try to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, but that's, no, I've made my living in finance and investments since 1990, because that's, like I said, $5,000 a year, you're not going to live very high on that.
Yeah, so farming was a choice for you, and something that you did later in life because you wanted to.
Yeah, I just want to say that I know several individuals that was like I was raised on a farm, then went on to a different career, and then when they was able to, they went back to farming.
Right.
But no, I'd have to say I've been more of a hobby farmer than anything else after I sold out the trucking business.
Right. You talked a little bit about the operation of your farm. Did it stay the same from when you got in the '90s until you decided to start leasing out?
Oh, pretty much. But it's what was kind of amazing was when I was a kid. Of course, we square baled everything. An old square baler, and
Was that alfalfa or?
no, just grass hay.
Grass hay. Okay.
But and I remember when I was a kid when we'd shock oats and thrash machine would come through, and they'd thrash for the whole community.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's, it's kind of like everything else that if you're not big, you're not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's several big farms around here that people still would just run stock cattle and and hay and what have you. But when I was a kid, to do 20 acres of cutting it, raking it, baling, it'd take a week or maybe even 10 days to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
And when we, of course, I had a round baler and what have you, and I'd do like 60 acres and, cut it, rake it, bale it, and be done in 3 days. I mean, that's how everything has changed.
It's changed. Yeah.
Not near as labor intense as it was back when I was a kid on the farm.
Sure. What would you say are the biggest benefits to farming in the Ozarks, in your experience, and in talking to other farmers?
Oh, I think just the enjoyment out of raising cattle, and that's about the only thing I miss is the calving in the spring and watching the young calves, and but other than that, I don't miss the labor intensive part of it.
But the lifestyle of it is
nice. Yeah, that's what I say. You go back where you was raised, and like you said, then I had another career for 30 years, and then turned around and went back to kind of the way I was raised. Everything's a lot more convenient now. I've got a recliner in the bedroom, and I sit there and watch TV, and if I want to get a drink, I walk over to the sink and get me a drink. If I need to go to the bathroom, I just step around the corner. And that was, when I was a kid, that was quite of an ordeal, because we never did have running water, so you had to go draw a bucket of water. If you want to go to the bathroom, there was a path out to that, so everything's a lot more convenient now than it was back then.
Sure.
But all in all, it's been a good experience, and it affects your life being raised like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we was considered poor, but the biggest majority of people was considered about the same way where I was raised. So, but it affects your decisions later in life to what you think you want to do or what you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are the greatest challenges of farming in the Ozarks now?
It's kind of like everything else. If you're not pretty big, you're just not gonna you can't make it on the farm. About everybody that's got in this area, that's the biggest tract of land, I guess, besides my place, is over here on KK. A friend of mine's got 40 acres. You haven't got enough land to run enough cattle or row crop or anything to make a living out of it. So if you're going to farm nowadays, you're going to be a pretty big time operation, and it's really expensive to, if you wanted to start up now and you just wanted to do hay, you'd have to buy a rake. It cost you $250,000 to just get into that business.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing is, you got to get big or get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of hobby farmers like me that around here, but in this area there's no big. Well, I guess the Lyle family still owns quite a bit of land over here, and I think they're all older, but they've all had another career even at that, and but they're back to running a few cattle and what have you. And they've got quite a bit of land, but that's not the only one. If you go on up north of Fairgrove, there's some bigger farmers up there, but there's and here around the lake, I mean, this is all 5-10 acre tracts now.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a real challenge to try to make a living in this area. Mm-hmm. With the price of property. I mean, you can't go buy. But the only way you could make a living now is that would be inherit the land and inherit the equipment, and you could probably make a living if you had 250, 400 acres of land.
Okay, so that's about 40 acres in the mid 19th century would equate to about 400 acres now to be able to make a living with it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you got this farm. You got this from your in-laws, is that correct?
Yes.
And you purchased it. I assume didn't you say you purchased it, or how did that work?
Oh, we built this house in the 80s, so probably about 76, somewhere along in there. I bought this 40 acres from my father-in-law.
Okay.
Like I said, and then I don't remember what year, but I bought the 20 next to me, and eventually bought their place where they live, and then I was able to get the 20 that belongs to east of me here, and then like I said, I just bought another 10 acre tract on the east of it. But that's what's available out here. There's I don't know, 40 acres. There's no way you could buy it and figure on it paying for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I've got one piece of property up on 125, 20 acres. My dad and I bought at probably about 85, and I think that's the only piece that it had brome. We put brome hay on it, and that's the only piece of property I've ever bought that I feel like it's paid for itself. Like I say, tracts of land around here now selling from $7,500, $10,000 an acre for 5 or 10 acre tracts, and 40 acres would probably cost you $200,000.
Right.
So.
Is that the proximity to the ever-growing, expanding Springfield? Is that what has driven the price up so much? And,
Well, I
people
think so.
developing
It's people wanting to get out in the country and get a 5 acres, which you got to have 5 acres in Greene County to build on, and it's just. And if you drive around this area, that's about what you see. Is everything north of me here is all small 5-10 acre tracts. Like I say, I got a friend that's got a 40 acre place over here, but about everything else is, they're cutting it up into smaller tracts, and this hasn't really grown out here like Nixon or Ozark, but eventually land prices are proving that it's starting to come this way, but there's not any major subdivisions or anything out here yet, but eventually that'll happen, I think.
Right, and subdivisions have really pumped up the price of land, I assume, too, where developers come in and develop, 20 acres or so forth, and then all of a sudden that just boosts up the price.
Well, I think Norma's granddad bought this 80 here in 1904 and gave $300 for it. So, and it's, we've been here since 80, so about 40 years, and it's just amazing what, if I had the foresight, I'd have bought a lot more land over here. I'd have bought anything that was available, but of course that's, my hindsight's always been better.
You talked a little bit about how technology has changed the operation some. Do you think technology has had a huge impact on farming in the Ozark region as it has in other areas of the country?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it used to take a week, 10 days to put up 20 acres, and you put up 60 or 80 acres with equipment and stuff's improved since I got out. So, I'd say you could put up 80 acres of hay, round bales, in 3 days now, because you could cut 80 in one day if you got 2 machines. Yeah, it's, the technology is kind of, along with everything else, has improved. That's with farming or anything else, stuff has advanced probably in the last 40 years more than it has since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
With the technology and stuff that's, my granddad used to cut hay with a 6 foot sickle mower, with a team.
Yeah.
Now you get 15-foot disc bind, and you can go as fast as the ground will let you run. So, yeah, it's.
You can imagine how shocked your grandfather would be if he could see the operations now.
Yeah, he would be totally amazed, at the way things have changed. Like I say, my granddad, he never had a tractor. He done all his farming with a team of horses.
Right.
So.
And I suppose that's true with other operations, with dairy farms, and certainly with cattle, buying and selling cattle now. I just saw the other day where this guy that sells a lot of cattle, he said people are bidding on his cows while they're in their combines with their phones. They're bidding on his cows.
Yeah, you see a lot of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's when we moved over here in 1980, there was probably a dairy, just every other corner there was a dairy. And I know of just 2 dairies now, and over when I lived at Willard, there was a lot of dairies over there, and I just know of one dairy that's still operating over there.
Even large dairies seem to be having trouble now. They're one of the largest in the country, I think, in Ohio, just a few months ago closed.
Yeah,
so, what do you suppose that is? Is it the labor cost,
No,
demand, or what?
I had, where, my friend over here, I think he's milking about 200 head, but the dairies out in Arizona and California, they're milking Oklahoma, 3,000 or 4,000 head, milk 24 hours a day, and that's drove down the price of milk. It's just really tough for that. I mean, the dairies I know of, they're struggling.
That was going to be one of my questions. Has the increasing divide between small and large farms affected the operations of farms? And it sounds like it has.
Oh, yeah, I think absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said, you either get big or get out. You know, and that's about the way things have happened. You know that everybody used to sell. Well, when I got out of the service, I went to work for Producers Creamery, which turned into Mid-Am, which I'm not even sure what it is now. But everybody around here sold milk up there, and they're trucking their milk in from way off now. I don't know sure where they're getting it, but there's not enough supply around here to supply them with the milk they need. You know, when I went to work 65 at Producers Creamery, and our main sold milk to Highland and Foremost, and we made butter, and then they had a contract with Mead Johnson that made Enfamil baby formula, and that's where but a lot of that was local milk, but I don't believe it is nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
They truck it in from out of state, a lot of it, from what I understand. Like Producers Creamery, like I say, they had Mead Johnson, but now they make iced coffee or something for Starbucks is their main thing. And they use a lot of milk, but I'm not sure where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But I know it's not local because there's not that many dairies around here. You see a bulk truck, whatever, that goes out on the farms and what have you, and you see one of them occasionally, and they used to just be all over Ferguson Feimster's farm up here. Of course, he's passed away, but the boys, they still milk.
Mm-hmm.
So that.
Is it the case that if you could survive it and stay in it when the others are falling away, does that increase your advantage at all?
I don't think so. If you was, like I say, if you had 400 acres or something, you could probably do that. Mm-hmm. But for me to get back into the cattle business now, I still couldn't make a living at it.
It had to be a huge investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even a friend of mine's got a farm up north of Buffalo. Yeah, he's got about 600 acres, I guess, and he runs a cattle operation. And he says it's profitable, but I still doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, you just, like I say, it's just the point. You either get bigger, and of course, but the price of property up there is, I don't know how long, he's probably owned that 10 years, but I think it's probably about doubled. So I don't think, land up there, it's probably $3,000 an acre, 500 acres. There's no way you can purchase that. I mean, he's got another business, but there's no way you could go in and purchase that 500 or 600 acres and buy machinery and borrow the money. It won't work. You can't pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not that much profit in it. About everybody that I know has got a larger farm has inherited it from a generation before, maybe 2 generations, and they've been able maybe to buy a little bit along with it. But to go out and buy the property and buy the equipment, build your buildings, it won't work.
It seems like the price of land is the largest issue in that has become such a huge part of your investment that
Right.
and that you still need a lot of land to do it. So
Yeah. Just investment in the land, then an investment in the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
It won't work.
yeah, it's insurmountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of pressure too on the next generation if they know how much that land has increased in value, they think, well, we can farm this or we can sell it. And
Well, it pretty well won't, unless you just really want to farm, if you're in it for the money, you're going to sell the land, because it won't work.
Right, right.
I mean, that's what I've got 125 acres, and there's no way that I mean, even I own the land now, and if I bought the cattle and got back and bought the equipment back and what have you, I couldn't rely on that to make a living.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's like I said before, everything has got well, I said I was in the trucking business. Well, they was probably 4 or 5 smaller carriers like us. I mean, we went from the Oklahoma line down to West Plains to the Arkansas line, and there's just 2 truck lines still in business. That was in business when I sold out.
Wow.
So that's another situation where they was about 4 or 5 carriers about like us, and they all went out several years ago, but it's everything's got bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You take UPS got into the trucking business, FedEx got into trucking business, and that's 2 of the biggies now,
And that drives the smaller ones out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because it seems like there was a trend, and not just in this area of the country, but in lots of areas of the country, where dairies began to move towards cattle operations in the mid to early in the early to mid 1960s, and maybe that had to do with the price of labor going up and more of the labor moving to cities and becoming more difficult to find labor for a labor intensive operation like a dairy. And it seems like cattle is king in some ways in this area for people who for the next generation that want to farm. So many of them are in beef cattle.
There's just not too much land around here that is tillable for like row crops and what have you. So it's all in this area is all. I mean, there's still a few people do some, but not a lot.
Right.
I mean, nobody's. You get around Lockwood, Lamar, and down in there, you get into bigger farms with, and they do a lot of row cropping.
Row crops.
But there's very little row. I mean, these people puts out a little patch of this or that, but there's very little row cropping in this area. It's all cattle.
Yeah, so livestock has been the farming operation of choice, largely dictated by the landscape, by the land here.
Right.
Yeah. And it seems like that's become sort of selective too, in that different breeds of cattle, to create a demand for a certain type of beef that's sold locally and so forth. That seems to be, some people seem to be making a living with it anyway.
Yeah, but I don't know. A lot of it's being subsidized. Ed Penninger's got several places over here around Ebenezer, but of course he's got Penninger Chevrolet, and I'm sure and he runs an awful lot of cattle, and I can't remember what breed he's into for sure, but I think the car agency is supporting the farming operation. He's got everything paid for, so it's probably carrying itself.
That leads to another question. When we talk about the next generation, what do you think is the future of farming in the Ozarks? Is it bright? Is it dim? Is it?
No, in this area, it's pretty dim on account of the closeness to Springfield. If you get further out, I'd say up towards Buffalo, up in there, there's larger farms, a lot of row cropping up in there, and that area they've probably maintain what they're doing now, or maybe even grow in that area. But for where we're at here, there's no opportunity for it to get any bigger or get any better, I don't think. But well, it's just the cost of the $10,000 land versus 3,000 or less up there, which 3,000 on a bigger place is a lot to cover.
Sure.
But they do a lot of chicken houses, egg operations up there around, and they do a lot of row cropping, and most of it's to supply their own needs. It's got the bigger operations.
Right. If someone were considering becoming a farmer, you just said, I've always dreamed of being a farmer, and that's what I want to be. What would you tell them?
Get a job.
Get a real job.
Yeah. Well, if you want a farm, you're going to have to subsidize it. I mean, I'm talking about this area here.
Yeah. Right.
But there's no opportunity in this area to make it work.
And do you know quite a few people who are making it work like that, where they have another business or another job while they're farming, and is farming more like a hobby for them?
Yeah.
Is that more typical now?
I think so. Yeah. Well, there's a few, like I say, that has inherited quite a bit of land and been able to purchase some more next to them. I mean, there's some individuals around here that are making it work. But it was they didn't go out and buy the property and buy the equipment. I mean, like their equipment they've accumulated along as they go, but all these are cattle operations.
Right.
But yeah, if you want to farm, get a job. Because you're going to have to subsidize it.
Yeah.
By the time I don't think if I was still running cattle that and still had my own equipment, I couldn't probably pay my taxes and insurance. It'd be about all I could cover with it. I mean, it's just there's big or get out. That's
yeah. What do you hear from people of your generation? If they talk about the next generation, do they talk about any of them going into farming, or do you hear that most of them have just given up on that idea altogether?
Yeah, the friend of mine has got this. I think it's almost 600 acres up at north of Buffalo. Yeah, he's got a son. He has no interest in taking it up. And I mentioned Ed Penniger a while ago. I think he's got a son and 2 girls, and I don't think. And he's acquired a lot of land, a lot of good land for cattle operations, but I don't think that they have any interest in. The younger generation, if you weren't raised on a farm, I don't think they have any interest in it at all.
And even some that were raised on a farm are not necessarily interested in it.
No.
Right.
Like I said, I was raised on a farm. I was gone for 40 years and then turned around and was able to go back to farming, but I couldn't make a living at it.
Yeah, just out of the love for it.
Yeah, just an enjoyment out of it. My dad, he loved to put up hay and what have you, so I've done it with him for, we sold out in 90, he passed away in 99. But then I think I may have went ahead and probably about 4 years, and then trying to get help and what have you too. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I've done a lot of it by myself, and I mean, it's tough to cut and rake it and bale it and fight the weather and everything, and try to get all that done by yourself. But I managed to do it for a while, but it just got kind of fun when Dad passed away. While the fun kind of went out of it, you know,
Right,
so.
right. Was it difficult to get labor to, and is it difficult to get labor to help on farms?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I haven't had to use anybody. I mean, my dad and I was able to do everything, but the people that's still milking, I think it's hard to get any help. You know, if you're milking 200 head, you know, you need some help, and I think it's difficult to. And there's still a few people that they're in the position that they can pay a pretty good wage. That's another thing. If you're hiring people and taking that out of your budget, well, that's a big chunk of what you're doing.
Anything else we didn't cover that you?
I'm just
That you'd
trying
like
to
to
answer
start?
your questions.
Yeah, well, you did a very good job of answering my questions. Thank you very much for doing this. This is very helpful, and I think it's going to be very helpful for students and scholars who are studying agriculture in this area. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.